Chapter 11, The Diary of Terror. Chris Hemsworth had already noticed the strange object behind the corpse. He reached out into the darkness and felt around, his fingers brushing against something solid. A notebook. A thick layer of dust coated its surface, imprinted with desperate fingerprints left behind by someone long ago. He opened it. Under the dim, pallid moonlight, the two of them saw hurried, trembling handwriting. June 1, 2037, overcast. Grandpa called today. He said Grandma misses Mom and wants her to come home. But for some reason, Mom refused outright. Normally, she cares about Grandma more than anyone. June 9, 2037, overcast. Mom didn't go to work today. She looks very frightened. What is Mom afraid of? June 12, 2037, overcast. These past few days, Mom has been secretly crying. I asked her why, but she didn't say anything, she just held me tightly. Too tightly. I could barely breathe. June 21, 2037, light rain. Grandma died. Grandpa called to tell Mom. After she hung up, Mom's face looked terrible. She suddenly left the house and didn't come back until very late at night. She gave me a piece of jade, red like blood, and told me to hang it on the window. No matter what happens, she said, I must never take it down. June 22, 2037, heavy rain. Mom packed her bags and left with Dad. They left only me and Aunt Wong, the maid who's taken care of me for years. Before leaving, they warned us, if we see them come back, we must never open the door. July 12, 2037, heavy rain. Mom came back. I remembered what they told me. But I still opened the door. I missed them too much. August 1, 2037, heavy rain. Something is wrong, it is not Mom. August 15, 2037, heavy rain. I'm not a good child. I didn't listen to Mom and Dad, and I let that terrifying thing into the house. Now it's outside. I'm so hungry. So thirsty. But I don't dare go out. Am I going to die? What should I do? Its contents. The diary ended straight through the bones. The two men looked at each other, silent for a long time. So, the old woman on the second floor wasn't the villa owner's mother, Eric Church swallowed hard. She was the maid. Then, that monster, he whispered. Chris Hemsworth closed the diary and looked at him. In the shoe cabinet by the entrance, there are many pairs of brand new women's shoes, he said calmly. I kept thinking, if a woman who loves shoes that much goes traveling, wouldn't she take at least a few pairs with her? Eric Church froze. They had passed that shoe cabinet countless times, yet none of them had noticed. Chris Hemsworth's powers of observation were terrifying. And don't you want to know, Chris Hemsworth continued, what those three words the old woman kept repeating actually were? Eric Church snapped back to his senses and stared at him. What were they? Under the pale moonlight, Chris Hemsworth met his gaze and slowly spoke a truth that made Eric Church's blood run cold. She wasn't saying the meat isn't familiar. She was trying to tell us. The person didn't leave. Eric Church stopped breathing, his eyes wide. You mean, the woman in the red dress we saw that day? She's still here. Chris Hemsworth nodded slowly. Yes. She never left. She's probably been hiding somewhere nearby, and she ate that girl. Thud. Eric Church's legs gave out, and he collapsed to the floor. Fuck. He trembled, his whole body icy cold. Chris Hemsworth walked to the window and reached out, touching the blood-red jade. What it was made of, what kind of object it really was. None of that mattered. What mattered was this. This jade could repel that horrifying thing. That thing no one truly understood. Thought of something. He turned sharply to Eric Church. Beard face, hurry. We split up. You go to the first floor kitchen, pretend you're preparing ingredients. The more, the better. Eric Church froze. Then what about you? I'll go to the second floor and bring the old woman up here, Chris Hemsworth replied. Eric Church immediately understood. We won't run into that monster, will we? Chris Hemsworth looked at him, his gaze unwavering. We have to gamble. There aren't many of us left. And this is the only time we can sneak in, while it's downstairs hunting. If we miss tonight, bringing the old woman and food up here will be much harder. Eric Church clenched his teeth. All right. There was no turning back now. He trusted Chris Hemsworth completely. Without him, Eric Church would have died on the very first night. At this point, all they could do was bet everything. They carefully left the room. After confirming the monster hadn't returned, they quickly split up. Eric Church ran down to the first floor kitchen. The kitchen was pitch black. Remembering Chris Hemsworth's warning, he didn't turn on the lights. Thankfully, he had worked here during the day, he remembered where everything was. Even so, his hands trembled violently. In the darkness, it felt as though countless eyes were watching him. From the corners. From behind doors. At any moment, a terrifying shadow could appear and swallow him whole. Faster, faster, he muttered. He took a deep breath and forced himself to stay calm. Cold sweat poured down his forehead. Soon, 3 bags were packed full of food. He hoisted them onto his shoulders and sprinted toward the stairs. Meanwhile, Chris Hemsworth was carrying the old woman upstairs. She was heavy, around 70 kilograms. Without his exceptional strength, he wouldn't have been able to carry her at all. Go first. Chris Hemsworth urged when he saw Eric Church hesitate and rushed up to the 3rd floor with the bags. Chris Hemsworth followed closely behind. The floor on the 3rd level was slick and slimy. He couldn't move fast, one slip, and he'd fall. And the old woman was frail. If they fell, no one knew what would happen. Faster, faster. Reaching the 3rd floor, Chris Hemsworth lunged toward the study. Eric Church was already at the door, peeking out, alert and tense. Suddenly, his eyes went wide in terror. He waved frantically at Chris Hemsworth and screamed, his voice shaking. Hurry! Brother! It's chasing you! A freezing chill shot up Chris Hemsworth's spine. Scrape, scrape. The horrifying sound of knife and fork grinding together echoed from behind. Chris Hemsworth clenched his teeth and charged forward like a moth to a flame. At this point, he didn't care whether he fell or not. He knew. If he hesitated even for a second, he would die. Icy breath spread through the air under the pale moonlight, enveloping him. He didn't dare turn around. He couldn't turn around. Faster. Faster. He roared silently, biting down hard, forcing his body forward. But no matter how hard he pushed himself, the sound of metal scraping drew closer and closer. This is bad. Carrying another person, he could never outrun that thing. 5 steps from the door. A cold, deathly pale hand suddenly shot out from behind and clamped around Chris Hemsworth's throat. Where do you think you're going? A resentful, icy female voice hissed in his ear. Chris Hemsworth's body went numb, all strength draining away. He slowed. Just as despair took hold and he waited for death. A figure burst out of the study and smashed hard into that pale arm. Aha! A shrill, agonized scream tore through the air. White smoke rose as the hand released him. At the same time, a warm hand grabbed Chris Hemsworth and yanked him into the study. Eric Church rushed to the window and hurriedly hung up the blood-red jade. Only then did he collapse to the floor, his legs shaking uncontrollably. Eh! The woman in the red dress screamed in manic rage. She crawled to the door, staring at them with venomous hatred. Only now, under the moonlight, did they see her face clearly. A face beyond nightmare. Her mouth was torn open all the way to her ears. Jagged teeth crammed her mouth, with glimpses of rotting flesh and tangled hair inside. Her eyes were filled with cracked, spiderweb-like veins, as if they might shatter at any moment. Her limbs were twice as long as a normal human's, her body contorted like a giant spider clinging to the wall. In her hand, she gripped a blood-soaked knife, sharp enough to make one's soul tremble. "Fuck, what the hell is that thing?" Eric Church gasped, feeling like he was suffocating. The woman in red howled furiously, slamming against the door again and again, trying to break in. But something held her back. In the end, she could only glare at them with hatred, snarling in rage. Before finally crawling away into the darkness. Chapter 12, The Photograph. So close. Just a little closer, and Chris Hemsworth would have died in the hands of that horrifying woman. If Eric Church hadn't charged out at the critical moment, clutching the blood-red jade and risking his life to intervene, Chris Hemsworth would already be dead. "Thank you." Chris Hemsworth sat cross-legged on the floor, one hand braced on his knee, gasping for breath. What had just happened was truly perilous beyond words. Eric Church slapped his legs, which were still shaking uncontrollably, then shook his head. "I should be the one thanking you. If you hadn't brought me here, even if I went back, I'd probably still end up getting eaten by that monster sooner or later." After saying that, he laughed. It was the uncontrollable laughter of someone who had narrowly escaped death. Like a madman, Eric Church sprawled on the floor, laughing loudly. Only after a long while did he finally calm down. "Right, kid. What about the others?" After helping the old woman sit up and confirming she wasn't seriously injured, Eric Church finally asked. Chris Hemsworth's gaze flickered slightly. "For now, we absolutely cannot go outside. It's far too dangerous. Tomorrow, we'll see if we can contact them from the third floor. If we really can't, then we can say we've done all we could." Toward the deaths of strangers, Chris Hemsworth seemed unusually indifferent. Of course, he didn't mind helping them, especially since they had no grudge against him. But only if it didn't put himself in danger. After all, when he had asked whether anyone was willing to risk their lives with him to uncover the truth, not a single person had stepped forward. Letting one person take all the risks while others reap the rewards, no one would accept that willingly. He was not some benevolent saint here to save everyone. "By the way, kid. I still have one question." Eric Church seemed to recall something important. "Ask." "Why, did you know the killing rules of the ghost in this villa?" At that question, Chris Hemsworth fell silent in the darkness for a long time. "Because before getting on the bus, I received an anonymous letter." "A letter?" "Yes. Inside it was a photograph, and a few lines of text." As he spoke, Chris Hemsworth slowly recited the words. "The wind does not light lamps, the rain does not kindle candles. By day, do not go upstairs. By night, do not close your eyes." Hearing this, Eric Church's eyes widened in disbelief. "Kid, that's insane, someone powerful is backing you up." "Then, where's the photograph?" Chris Hemsworth glanced at him, his eyes stirring slightly. "You really want to know?" Eric Church froze. "Is it inconvenient? If it is, then." Before he could finish, Chris Hemsworth reached into his black and white checkered shirt and pulled out a slightly yellowed photograph, holding it face out. The instant Eric Church saw it, his pupils shrank violently. No way. In the pale moonlight, the person in the photograph was unmistakable. It was Eric Church himself. The two stared at each other, separated only by a thin piece of paper, neither speaking for a long time. Eric Church could see his own image in the photo, but not the writing on its back. Yes, on the reverse side of that aged photograph were words written in black ink. "A friend worth knowing, but plagued by 100,000 whys." Eric Church reached out, wanting to take the photo and examine it more closely, but Chris Hemsworth pulled it back and smiled. "Surprised?" I was surprised too. At first, I thought it was just a malicious prank, or that someone had sent it to the wrong person. But when I woke up on that bus, and saw you, I realized things weren't as simple as I thought. The dense and mysterious fog, the strange blood-red door, and us, sitting inside that bus. All of it, there must be an unseen hand behind the scenes, manipulating everything. Eric Church let out a bitter laugh. Kid, forgive me for being blunt, but in the real world, no one should be capable of doing all this. You've seen the outside conditions too. This goes far beyond what humans can accomplish. Chris Hemsworth remained silent. He didn't continue arguing. But that mysterious letter, so far, everything written in it had come true. The bizarre blood door. The twisted killing rules. And a friend he had never known before, yet who was willing to risk his life to save him. That was the truly terrifying part. It was as if someone was always watching him from a place he could never see. The night passed without further conversation. Neither of them had slept much to begin with, and after such tension, exhaustion finally crashed down on them like a tide once things settled. When dawn arrived the next day, the silence of the villa was shattered by a shrill scream from the second floor. Another person had died. And what terrified the survivors on the second floor even more was not just waking up to another death, but the disappearance of 3 people. Among them was Chris Hemsworth, the group's psychological anchor. And more importantly, the key target of their mission. After all, the task given by the blood door was to take care of the old woman in the bed for 5 days. Now that the old woman was gone, what were they supposed to take care of? Chris Hemsworth and Eric Church listened to the noise from below and learned that the man who died last night was named Lux. Wow. They're all gone. Have they all been? Wow. I'm so scared. I don't want to die here. The broken sobs of Mary drifted up from downstairs. Eric Church shouted desperately toward the window, trying to pass the message down, but it was as if their voices were bound to the 3rd floor. No matter how hoarse he screamed, no one came. No one heard. Enough. Stop shouting. Seeing Eric Church's refusal to give up, Chris Hemsworth shook his head slightly. Eric Church felt uncomfortable with Chris Hemsworth's coldness. Kid, aren't you a doctor? There are 2 living people down there. Are we really just going to abandon them like this? Isn't that a bit too much? Chris Hemsworth closed his eyes and said calmly. I may be a veterinarian, but even in medicine, there are 3 kinds one does not save. Eric Church froze. 3 kinds you don't save? Which 3? Chapter 13, The End. Chris Hemsworth said calmly. I don't save animals that are already destined to die, wasted effort. I don't save animals that are on the brink of death, it drains my lifespan. I don't save animals with incurable diseases, it brings bad contagion upon me. Eric Church almost burst out laughing when he heard that. Are you messing with me? You're a veterinarian, if you won't save this and won't save that, wouldn't you starve to death? Chris Hemsworth let out a faint, indifferent smile. I'm a veterinarian, yes, but not only a veterinarian. Who told you I make my living solely by treating pets? Eric Church spread his hands. All right, fine, then what kind of animals do you save? Chris Hemsworth answered casually. Whichever ones I find pleasing to the eye. Even if I know I can't save them, I'll still try my best. Even if it costs me dearly. Eric Church looked at him with mild surprise, then smiled. This guy really had an interesting personality. Stopping his laughter, Eric Church suddenly thought of something. He began scribbling inside the room, then tied the notes together with the curtain and repeatedly knocked them against the window facing downstairs. If his voice couldn't reach the 2nd floor, then perhaps the sound from the 3rd floor could attract their attention. But after just 2 knocks, the curtain snapped. Eric Church pulled back the remaining half, tugged at it cautiously, and muttered. That's not right, it was clearly sturdy. How could it tear so easily? He tried again several times. Every attempt ended the same. The strange phenomenon sent a chill down Eric Church's spine. Vaguely, he felt as though something unseen was observing him. Uneasy, he gave up on trying to send any message downstairs. "What's wrong?" Seeing that he finally stopped, Chris Hemsworth asked casually. Cold sweat broke out on Eric Church's back. "I feel like something is watching me." He didn't finish the sentence. "If I keep doing this." But Chris Hemsworth understood perfectly. Clearly, under the villa's rules, the third floor was isolated from the others. Trying to transmit information from the third floor to the second or first, was equivalent to breaking the rules of the world behind the blood door. And that would invite unspeakable misfortune. "Looks like this time, they can only leave it to fate," Eric Church sighed. He sat down beside the skeleton by the window, picked up the diary in its bony hands, flipped through it for a moment, then asked. "So, what do you think that monster outside really is?" Chris Hemsworth thought for a moment. Based on what's written in the diary, that terrifying woman outside must be connected to the girls somehow. And her parents definitely knew something. But the exact truth, we can't know. Maybe after everything ends, when we return, we can ask the man in the suit. Eric Church nodded lightly. For the next 3 days, they ate, slept, and lived inside that room. Thankfully, there was enough food and water. Survival wasn't a problem. As for the 2 people left downstairs, they ultimately couldn't endure the final 3 days. On the night of the 3rd day, Calyx was also killed and eaten by the female ghost in the villa, leaving only Mary, mentally shattered by terror. She fled from the villa into the rain. Her ending needed no explanation. Eric Church felt somewhat unsettled. After all, they had lived together for a while, and none of them were bad people. But that discomfort faded with time. At midnight on the 5th day, the 2 of them, sleeping soundly, were jolted awake by the sudden blare of a horn outside the window. They sprang to their feet and rushed to the window, staring into the rain. A bus had stopped outside the villa, its horn blaring. They recognized it and carried them into the fog. "It's here. The bus is here. But, kid, how are we supposed to get out?" Eric Church shouted in joy, but the moment he turned around, his excitement was extinguished by icy fear. Standing at their doorway, was that tall, skeletal woman in the red dress, staring at them with ravenous hunger. She seemed to know they were trying to leave. "We have to think fast. That bus will not wait for us long." Chris Hemsworth's eyes flashed as he searched desperately for tools. Just as he was considering smashing through the iron bars on the window, the old woman lying nearby spoke. Her voice was weak, but clear enough for both of them to hear. "Young men, push me outside." The 2 slowly lowered their heads to look at her. To their surprise, her expression was calm, her eyes briefly regaining clarity. After enduring prolonged torment, she seemed to have chosen her end. "When it's eating something, it can't do anything else. Push me out. While it eats me, you hurry and leave. Never come back." Eric Church stared wide-eyed. How can that be allowed? "Damn it, kid, are you really going to push her out?" Chris Hemsworth replied without hesitation. "Push her, 1 dies. Don't push, 3 die." The old woman smiled faintly. "He's right. I won't blame you. Living is already too painful for me. Think of it as doing a good deed. Help me find release." Hearing this, Eric Church stopped hesitating. Gritting his teeth, he and Chris Hemsworth pushed the old woman out, right in front of the red-dressed ghost. At first, the ghost hadn't intended to eat her. She needed the old woman alive as bait. But after 2 days without food, she couldn't resist the fresh flesh delivered to her mouth. She raised the plate in her hand and stabbed it brutally into the old woman's chest, so cruel that it made Eric Church retch. "Go, now." Chris Hemsworth snatched the blood jade from the windowsill and dashed past the frenzied, feeding ghost together with Eric Church. Bone-chilling cold radiated from the ghost's hateful gaze, turning their legs to jelly. But the old woman hadn't lied. While eating, the monster couldn't do anything else. Faster. Chris Hemsworth glanced back and shouted. She eats fast. Eric Church ran ahead, cold sweat pouring down, teeth clenched as he sprinted down the stairs. Bang! He nearly tore the villa's front door off its hinges. The yellow headlights of the bus ahead shone like salvation from heaven, guiding them forward. When Chris Hemsworth burst out of the villa, a horrifying roar erupted from the third floor, followed by thunderous crashes throughout the building. The red-dressed ghost was chasing them. Kid, hurry. Hurry. Eric Church didn't get on the bus immediately. He stood at the door, shouting desperately at Chris Hemsworth. When Chris Hemsworth reached the bus, Eric Church grabbed him and hauled him inside. Right behind them, the monstrous woman, crawling like a twisted spider, was only a few steps away. But the moment Chris Hemsworth boarded the bus, the ghost stopped dead. She could only scream madly at them, powerless. She didn't dare approach the bus. That ferocious red-dressed ghost seemed deeply afraid of the vehicle they were riding. At last, she slowly turned around and disappeared into the rain, back toward the old, decaying villa. Chapter 14, Assembling the Shattered Pieces. Sitting back down on the driverless bus, Chris Hemsworth and Eric Church finally dared to breathe again. Did we survive? Eric Church, his bearded face slick with sweat, gasped for air. He stared through the bus window toward the distant villa, where the tall, emaciated female ghost had disappeared. Only then did he realize his legs had turned to mud, trembling uncontrollably. Yes. Chris Hemsworth replied. After that, neither of them spoke. 5 days had passed. There had been 7 people on this bus at the beginning. Now, only 2 remained. An unnamed sorrow welled up inside Eric Church. He hadn't been especially close to the others, but witnessing their gruesome deaths with his own eyes left an unavoidable ache in his chest. Because he had stood on that same edge of death. If it weren't for Chris Hemsworth, his fate would have been no different from theirs. Not long after they boarded, the bus doors slid shut, and the vehicle slowly began to move. Soon, they passed once more through the curtain of rain and plunged back into the fog. Both of them drifted into a dazed sleep. When they awoke again, it was early morning. Chris Hemsworth stretched and looked out the window. They had arrived outside the small courtyard of the Black Villa. Hey, Beard, wake up. Chris Hemsworth shook Eric Church. He jolted upright with a scream. A ghost. The ghost's here. Run. Chris Hemsworth silently watched Eric Church panic, thinking how pitiful the man was, already chased by ghosts during Bloodgate missions, and even in his dreams he still had to work overtime. After realizing the person beside him was Chris Hemsworth, Eric Church wiped the sweat from his face and panted heavily. Little brother, you scared me half to death. Chris Hemsworth pointed toward the dark courtyard outside. Get off. We're here. They stepped down from the bus one after the other and entered the grand hall. They found only one person inside. It was the strikingly beautiful young man. He looked like a doll, porcelain pale skin, a slender and delicate frame. If he didn't speak, almost no one would think he was male. Why is it just you? Eric Church frowned. Seeing the two return from beyond the blood gate, the youth's attitude was noticeably warmer than before. Uncle Vincent had something to take care of and went back to the previous world. Sister Alice escorted newcomers through the blood gate. There's also someone cooking in the kitchen. A glint flashed in Chris Hemsworth's eyes. We can go back to the previous world. The youth casually poked the embers in the stove. Why not? You can come here by bus, so naturally, you can go back by bus too. Ha! After speaking, the youth sighed and brushed back his long hair. This is the part one hate the most. Every time newcomers arrive, I have to explain everything again and again until my mouth goes dry. What's worse is that sometimes I tell them all the rules today, and next week, they're already dead. But since you've survived a blood gate and made it back, ask whatever you want, while you still can. The two exchanged glances. After a moment's thought, Chris Hemsworth asked, "What exactly are the blood gate and the fog?" The youth answered, "A curse. We're all cursed people. The fog is an isolated world, cut off from the outside. The only way in is by the bus that runs through the fog. Our villa area is called Ghost House. And just like ours, there are many ghost houses in the fog world. Correspondingly, there are also many blood gates. At regular intervals, we're forced to enter the terrifying world behind a blood gate. We complete its mission, struggle to survive, and at the same time, collect fragments. When we gather all 12 fragments, we can take the completed puzzle, board the bus, and head for the end of the fog world." The youth pointed toward a picture frame in the hall. The two turned to look. The image was already half complete. It depicted a human head in decay. In the center of the forehead was a bloody hole, like a grotesque third eye, ferocious and horrifying. "What's at the end of the fog world?" Chris Hemsworth asked. The youth shrugged. "No idea. We've never been there. And don't blame us for being so cold earlier. You know how it is. In this world, death is routine. If you grow close to someone and they die after a blood gate, it hurts too much." When he said this, his expression tightened slightly. "Did something happen in Ghost House before we arrived?" Chris Hemsworth seemed to grasp something. Before he could finish, the youth nodded gently. "About half a month ago, right before you came, Uncle Vincent's closest friend died after a blood gate. And Sister Alice's best friend, Kirsten, committed suicide afterward. That's why everyone's been in such a bad mood." Recalling the oppressive atmosphere in the hall when they first entered Ghost House, the two finally understood. "All right, food's almost ready. After eating, if you don't want to stay here, you can wait at the bus stop outside the villa. In a week, when it's time for your second blood gate mission, the bus will come pick you up early." At the dining table, 4 people sat facing one another, eating in silence. "Honestly, your cooking isn't very good," Eric Church muttered after a few bites. John Travolta looked up, his gaze icy as it locked onto Eric Church. "If you don't like it, you can wash the dishes. Or cook for yourself." Eric Church was usually carefree and hot-tempered. He was about to snap back, but when facing John Travolta, his body shrank back instinctively. John Travolta's eyes were terrifying. Eric Church felt as if a knife were pressed against his throat. He was almost certain that this man named John Travolta had killed before. Still, Eric Church wasn't one to back down. He stiffened his neck and said, "Fine. I'll cook for myself. I'll say this right now, starting today, I, Eric Church, am the head chef here. As long as I'm around, none of you are allowed in the kitchen. Whatever you want to eat, I'll make it." He forced his voice to sound as tough as possible. Chris Hemsworth couldn't help but laugh. During the meal, he learned that there were 4 long-term residents in Ghost House. Davis Bertans was the house head, and the earliest to enter Ghost House. The youth was named Andrew Garfield, an orphan who depended on each other with his younger sister. John Travolta was Davis Bertans's close friend in the outside world. He had once been a soldier and had fought on the border battlefield. The beautiful Alice Englert was extremely mysterious. No one knew her true background, only that in the outside world, she was formidable. At one point, Chris Hemsworth mentioned the red-clad female ghost from their first blood gate. But after hearing it, both John Travolta and Andrew Garfield fell into silence. "Hey, why aren't you two saying anything?" Eric Church couldn't help asking. As soon as he spoke, John Travolta picked up his bowl and chopsticks and walked into the kitchen. "I'm done eating." His voice was flat and cold. Both Chris Hemsworth and Eric Church clearly felt the change in John Travolta's attitude. It was too sudden. As if a warm spring had been instantly smothered by the grip of a freezing winter. Chapter 15, The Second Letter. What the hell is wrong with them? Did we say something taboo? Eric Church was baffled by the sudden shift in attitude from Andrew Garfield and John Travolta. It felt as if he had accidentally blurted out something he absolutely shouldn't have. Andrew Garfield's face was dark. After a long pause, he finally let out a breath. "You two really have terrible luck." Chris Hemsworth and Eric Church exchanged glances. Chris Hemsworth frowned. "What do you mean?" Andrew Garfield began explaining the terrifying mechanics of the world beyond the blood gate. The ghosts inside a blood gate are divided into two types. The first type is native-born, called bound spirits. No matter how powerful they are, no matter how deep their resentment runs, once we complete the mission and leave the blood gate, our karma with them ends. The second type. He paused, his tone growing heavier. Is special. Even though they're restricted by the rules of the blood gate, they aren't confined to a single location. After slaughtering all the NPCs in one area, they move on to wreak havoc elsewhere. These ghosts carry resentment far too great. Usually, if you encounter one of them in an early blood gate, the following blood gates will be tied to its story. Blood gates like that are far more difficult. And the mortality rate is much higher than normal. After a brief silence, Andrew Garfield spoke with a hint of pity. "I don't know what kind of bad karma you two picked up, but to meet this kind of ghost in your very first blood gate. No wonder only 2 of you made it back alive. But honestly, you probably won't last much longer. I'm not trying to curse you, just go write your wills and settle your affairs. Say goodbye properly to your family and friends." With a sigh, Andrew Garfield cleared the dishes and walked into the kitchen. And Eric Church understand why everyone's attitude had changed so abruptly. Because in their eyes, the 2 of them were already dead. Are we really doomed to fail? If we survived once against that ghost, we can survive a second time. A third time too. They think we won't make it through the next blood gate. Then we'll live long enough to prove them wrong. Eric Church sounded fierce, but Chris Hemsworth could still hear the subtle tremor buried beneath his bravado. After the dishes were done, Andrew Garfield led them to their assigned room in Ghost House. To their surprise, it wasn't inside the villa. Instead, it was a small, single-story house behind the flower garden. Though chilly, it felt far more comfortable than the oppressive darkness of the villa. Andrew Garfield handed them the keys, gave a few reminders, then went back to the villa to watch TV. There was a television in their room as well, but the one in the villa was much larger. Still troubled by unanswered questions, Chris Hemsworth and Eric Church didn't return to the outside world. They decided to wait for househead Davis Bertans to come back and ask about the next blood gate. But late into the night, no one returned. In the end, they chose to wait one more day. Near midnight, unable to sleep, Chris Hemsworth stepped into the garden to clear his mind. That was when he heard voices coming from inside the villa. He frowned and quietly moved closer to the back door, listening. Inside were the voices of a woman and a steady, deep-voiced man. The man's voice, Chris Hemsworth recognized it as John Travolta. The woman, he had never heard before. It had to be Alice Englert. "Alice, are you absolutely sure?" John Travolta asked. "What, you don't trust me?" she replied coolly. "Do you have any idea about Davis's relationship with Vincent? If he finds out Vincent was killed by a person, he'll never let say something when she suddenly turned her head and stared coldly in Chris Hemsworth's direction. "Who's there? Come out." Chris Hemsworth stepped out of the shadows. Seeing that it was the newcomer from Ghost House, the chill on Alice Englert's beautiful face softened slightly. She wore crimson lipstick. So red. Like a blazing phoenix, utterly at odds with her gentle-sounding name. "It's late. Why aren't you asleep?" she asked. Chris Hemsworth didn't mind her attitude. "Aren't you two still awake as well?" He calmly sat down on the sofa, his gaze drifting to the brazier in the center of the room. His appearance abruptly cut off their conversation. "What's your name?" Alice Englert finally asked. "Chris Hemsworth." "HM. How did the first blood gate feel?" Chris Hemsworth opened a bottle of beer on the table and took a sip. "Honestly? Not great. I almost died." Alice Englert hummed and offered a perfunctory comfort. "That's how the world behind the blood gate is. One careless step and you're dead. But once you pass the first gate, the ones after are easier to breathe through." She hadn't finished when John Travolta interrupted coldly. "There won't be any gates after that." Alice Englert was startled. "John Travolta, what do you mean?" John Travolta stood up. "Ask him yourself. I'm going to sleep." With that, he walked away without looking back. Alice Englert turned to Chris Hemsworth, and he recounted the events of their first blood gate in detail. Of course, he concealed part of the truth. About the mysterious anonymous letter. He only said they had stumbled upon the death rules by chance. As she listened, Alice Englert's expression shifted repeatedly. It was a complicated look. Approval. Sympathy. And even a trace of regret. Garfield are right. The red-clad ghost behind your first blood gate wasn't an ordinary bound spirit. It was a vicious wraith, extremely hard to deal with. You were lucky it was your first instance. Its abilities and killing rules were heavily restricted by the blood gate. Combined with your courage and caution, you managed to find a way out in time. Otherwise, there's no way you would have made it back alive. And your next blood gate will definitely be connected to that ghost. If you can deal with it, you might even bring back a ghost artifact. Chris Hemsworth froze. A ghost artifact? Alice Englert flipped her hand. A blood-stained wooden comb appeared in her slender palm. Like this. Normally, items from inside a blood gate can't be taken out. But some high-difficulty gates contain powerful tools, extremely rare, each with its own unique function. For example, my wooden comb. As long as I run it through my hair, ghosts won't be able to lock onto me for 1 minute. These ghost artifacts can dramatically increase our survival chances inside a blood gate. Chris Hemsworth recalled the blood jade he had taken from the first blood gate and fell into thought. You couldn't bring items out of a blood gate. Except ghost artifacts. So that meant, the blood jade was one too. Seeing his silence, Alice Englert assumed he was frightened by the next blood gate. After hesitating briefly, she spoke again. Well, there aren't many people left in our ghost house anyway. The recent batches of newcomers were terrible, wiped out before even reaching the third gate. This weekend, when you enter your second blood gate, I'll guide you through once. Free of charge. And besides, you too have potential. Worth cultivating. Only then did Chris Hemsworth remember Andrew Garfield mentioning that Alice Englert escorted newcomers through blood gates. Is that really allowed? He asked, nodded, surprised. Newcomers can be guided through their first 6 blood gates. There are even offices that specialize in this. But guides usually demand exorbitant fees. After all, everyone's human. Even with experience, low-difficulty blood gates can still be deadly. Chris Hemsworth nodded in understanding. Risking one's life for money, high compensation was only natural. After grasping all this, Chris Hemsworth rested for the night in Ghost House, then took the bus back to the outside world. As soon as he got home, he turned on his computer. A friend named Groundhog had sent him a message. It was short. I couldn't find anything. The post office has no record of that anonymous letter. They told me the letter I'm looking for is a letter that doesn't exist. But don't worry. I'll keep an eye out for you. Chris Hemsworth narrowed his eyes. Groundhog was his friend. Someone, extremely good at finding things. Even you couldn't find it. Chris Hemsworth murmured. Ding, dong. As he was deep in thought, the doorbell suddenly rang. Startled, Chris Hemsworth stood up and opened the door. A middle-aged woman in her 50s named Tara. She wore a floral blouse, looking like she had just returned from a stroll. Beads of sweat dotted her forehead as she smiled and handed him an envelope. Chris, you've got mail. Chris Hemsworth took the letter, his expression changing instantly. Aunt Tara, where did you get this letter? Tara unlocked her door and replied casually. From the mailbox downstairs. You really are forgetful. Remember to check your mailbox every time you come home. With that, she went inside. Chris Hemsworth closed his door, the letter still in his hand. He walked into the living room, sat on the sofa, and stared at the envelope on the coffee table. His breathing grew rapid. The second letter. He tore it open. Anonymous again. But this time, there was no message, only a photograph. The image froze Chris Hemsworth in place. It was Alice Englert. The photo was old and yellowed, as if it had been taken many years ago. Yet Alice Englert in the picture looked exactly the same age as the woman he had just met. Her smile was vivid and lifelike. The red lipstick on her lips had not faded with time, still as brilliant as ever. Damn it. This time, even Chris Hemsworth couldn't stay calm. This was far too bizarre. He flipped the photo over. His fingers trembled slightly. There was a line of writing on the back. She must not die at your second door. As I suspected. A chill ran down Chris Hemsworth's spine. Whoever was sending these letters was watching him from somewhere. But why did this person have these photos? And why warn him? What did they really want? Chapter 16, The Second Blood Gate, Kai Vu Village. Setting the yellowed photograph down, Chris Hemsworth felt his heart hammering wildly in his chest. Who, exactly, was watching him? And more terrifying still, even the fog world itself could not block that person's gaze. Sitting on the sofa, it took Chris Hemsworth a long time to steady his breathing. After some hesitation, he sent all the information to his friend, Groundhog. Groundhog replied almost immediately. Well, this is getting interesting. Haven't even finished investigating the first letter, and now there's a second one. Don't worry. I'm not very busy lately, I'll do my best to help. If I still can't dig anything up, I'll contact that woman. At the mention of that woman, Chris Hemsworth froze. After a moment, he only replied, Thanks. Ending the call, it felt as though all the strength had been drained from his body. He collapsed onto the sofa. A few days later, one morning, while brushing his teeth, Chris Hemsworth suddenly sensed something was wrong. He rinsed his mouth carelessly and walked to the window. Sure enough. Thick fog had swallowed the entire apartment complex. An old, dilapidated bus was parked downstairs. Within a 10-meter radius around it, there was no fog at all, as if an invisible barrier had been erected. Chris Hemsworth opened his door. The whole building was silent. As though he were the only one left in the world. With a sigh, he returned inside, picked up the blood jade he had taken from the first blood gate, and headed downstairs. The moment he stepped onto the bus, a familiar voice rang out, full of delight. Little brother. Chris Hemsworth looked up, stunned for a few seconds before recognizing. It was Eric Church. This time, however, Eric Church looked different. He had shaved off his thick much cleaner and more energetic, though the roughness in his features remained. Just the two of us? Chris Hemsworth asked, sitting beside him. Looks like it, Eric Church sighed. Despite his usual carefree demeanor, Chris Hemsworth noticed the dark circles under his eyes. Clearly, he hadn't slept well these past few days. Nightmares again? Chris Hemsworth asked. Eric Church nodded, unscrewing a bottle of water and muttering. Damn it, that female ghost keeps showing up in my dreams. Scares the hell out of me every time. Chris Hemsworth teased. Seems like she's really in love with you. Fate travels 1,000 miles on a single thread, you should cherish this opportunity. Pfft. Eric Church spat out the water he'd just swallowed. Hey, that's crossing the line. If you cherish it so much, why don't you go love her instead? Chris Hemsworth shrugged regretfully. I'd love to, but she doesn't even spare me a glance. Never appeared in my dreams once. Hearing this, Eric Church's face turned even paler as he muttered curses about beautiful women bringing trouble wherever they go. Then Chris Hemsworth suddenly remembered something. Oh right, there's something you never told me. Back in the First Blood Gate, why were you sticking to me the whole time? After several days, revisiting the topic made Eric Church roll his eyes, his expression turning mysterious. Little brother, let me ask you something, do you believe in fate? Caught off guard, Chris Hemsworth paused. After thinking for a moment, he shook his head. No. Eric Church chuckled. I do. He flipped his hand open, revealing 3 square coins. Each was tied with a string, one red, one yellow, one blue. In that blood gate, I cast 3 divinations. In the end, I realized that 2 of them were death hexagrams. Only the one connected to you was different. You were the only life hexagram Chris Hemsworth's eyes as he smiled. Eric Church, you really do know how to read fortunes. Eric Church sighed. What can I say? It's hard to make a living these days. The world's dangerous, having more skills never hurts. Then why didn't you tell me earlier? Chris Hemsworth asked. At that, Eric Church looked wary. Little brother, our line of work has its taboos. First, never divine for yourself. Divine for others, never for yourself, divine for yourself, and death is guaranteed. Second, never divine for colleagues once you already know the situation. Third, never divine for the dead. Besides the 3 don'ts, there are 2 things you must never say. First, never tell the whole truth to the one being divined. The more you say, the shorter your own lifespan. Second, never speak of matters with massive consequences. If you're just saving one person, or helping them avoid a single disaster, the backlash is limited. But if that person's life and death affects too many things. He lowered his voice. Then the diviner must not interfere lightly. Or heaven itself will punish you. So once everything was over, saying it out loud wouldn't affect you anymore. Is that it? Eric Church nodded. Exactly. What's already happened, anything can be said. The bus plunged into the fog. No new passengers boarded. Soon, they arrived once more at the familiar ghost house. The moment they stepped inside, they saw 4 people sitting in the main hall. They seemed to be discussing something important. The conversation abruptly stopped when the 2 entered. Looks like we came at a bad time, Chris Hemsworth joked. Davis Bertans replied gently. Ghost house is our home, and yours as well. You can come back anytime. There's no such thing as bad timing here. Oh, right. Your second door is about to open. Are you ready? Chris Hemsworth sighed. If we're not ready, does that mean we don't have to go in? An eerie silence fell over the hall. Alice Englert stood up. Let's go. 3rd floor. She had changed into a tight-fitting athletic outfit, looking far more youthful and energetic than when she wore her nightdress. The 2 followed her up to the 3rd floor of Ghost House. At the center stood the same wooden door, radiating a chilling aura that made one shiver to the bone. This time, several new lines of blood-red text had appeared on its surface. Mission: survive the temple sacrifice on the 7th day of the village. Clue: the kind-hearted bled dry, becoming sweet rain. The benevolent were beheaded, granting peace. The innocent closed their eyes, praying for sweet rain and peace to descend. They waited. And waited. Chapter 17, Kai Vu Village, the Headless one. The Blood Gate gives hints now? Chris Hemsworth asked in surprise. Beside him, Alice Englert explained calmly. Only the first Blood Gate doesn't. Because 99.999% of players face extremely low difficulty at the first gate. For ghosts, killing people there isn't easy. Most of the time, they only scare you, they don't truly strike. She paused, then teased the two of them with a faint smile. So you could say you were unlucky. Your very first gate ran into that kind of ghost, and you almost got wiped out completely. After the first gate, the difficulty of the second increases by 1 level. In exchange, the Blood Gate provides corresponding, crucial hints. As for the 6th gate after that, we can talk about it later. Right now, the top priority is figuring out how to survive your second gate. She looked at them seriously. Because your second gate is far from simple. After Alice Englert's patient explanation, Chris Hemsworth firmly memorized the words carved into the Blood Gate. The kind-hearted bled dry, becoming sweet rain. The benevolent severed their own heads, granting peace. The innocent closed their eyes, praying for sweet rain and peace. The hint was deeply unsettling. Almost ritualistic. And horrifying. Before long, it was time to enter. Once again, the blood-stained wooden door was slowly pushed open by a pale, corpse-like hand. Darkness rushed in. And the consciousness of the three people quickly dissolved. When Chris Hemsworth awoke again, he found himself standing before a massive building. It was old and crumbling. The white walls at the entrance were cracked all over, coated in damp green moss. Broken stones and weeds littered the ground. On the white wall to the right, red paint spelled out a line of words. Kai Vu Village Tourist Guesthouse. Tourist Group. So this time, we're tourists. Chris Hemsworth muttered. There were 14 he scanned people in total, standing in clusters of 3. No surprises there, they were clearly like him, people from the ghost house beyond the Blood Gate. Soon, Chris Hemsworth spotted Eric Church and Alice Englert. But, both of them looked unwell. He walked over and asked quietly. What's wrong? Alice Englert tilted her chin toward Eric Church, sounding lazy. Ask him. Chris Hemsworth turned his gaze to Eric Church. Sweat covered the man's face, and terror flickered in his eyes. I spawned at the foot of the mountain behind that forest. Eric Church said, breathing heavily. I followed the signposts through the woods, but halfway in. I saw a headless person. Chris Hemsworth narrowed his eyes. You're sure? Eric Church swallowed hard, fear overflowing from his gaze. Yes. I'm sure. It just kept walking forward, and then. His voice began to tremble. Say it. Then what? Chris Hemsworth urged. What followed sent a chill crawling up Chris Hemsworth's spine. Then. Eric Church whispered. It blended into the crowd, and disappeared. Chris Hemsworth froze. Disappeared? Eric Church nodded frantically. Yes. That headless thing, it's hiding among the people here. After saying that, he scanned the surroundings in panic, taking a deep breath. Chris Hemsworth turned to Alice Englert. Sister Alice, what do you think? She shook her head. Don't panic yet. This is only your second gate. The ghosts aren't twisted enough to start killing the moment you arrive. But. Her tone hardened slightly. You still need to be careful. As soon as she finished speaking, a middle-aged man's voice suddenly came from outside. Everyone, sorry to keep you waiting. All eyes turned toward the plain clothes, with dark skin and a modest appearance, walked toward them. Let me introduce myself. My name is Ho Kong. I'm the group leader for Kai Vu Village's tourism company. I'll be on duty these next few days, usually sitting in the lobby on the first floor. If you have any issues, feel free to come to me. If you enjoy this trip, please help promote us afterward. Thank you. As he spoke, he smiled and handed out room keys to everyone present. Next to the guest house is a free dining hall. After you've eaten, you're welcome to walk around. Our Kai Vu village has quite a few unique attractions. 7 days from now is the village's annual temple sacrifice festival. Everyone in the village will participate. You're welcome to join as well. Even if outsiders like you don't believe in these things, asking for a blessing never hurts. He gave a few more instructions, then led everyone into the guest house. Throughout the entire process, Ho Kong wore a faint smile. It was light, subtle, yet deeply unsettling. Chris Hemsworth felt goosebumps rise after just one glance. These are your rooms. Electricity and hot water are available 24 hours a day. There are also a few village rules, please try your best to follow them. First, there is a curfew in the village. From midnight to 6 in the morning, it's best not to go outside. Second, the mountain behind the village is where the temple is located. Preparations for the sacrifice are underway, so outsiders are strictly forbidden from approaching. Third, if you encounter anything strange in the village, you may go seek Nguyen, a female spirit medium. After saying that, Ho Kong ignored whether anyone had questions, turned around, and hurried downstairs. Through the lobby window, Chris Hemsworth watched him walk into the dark, dense forest, and never come back out. Once he recovered his senses, Chris Hemsworth began inspecting his room. The wooden floors and doors were cracked. But the room itself was clean. Because Chris Hemsworth, Eric Church, and Alice Englert had stood together when the keys were handed out, their rooms were adjacent. Inside his room, Chris Hemsworth glanced at the ticking clock on the wall. 3 p.m. Still some time before dinner. He paced around. The bed and floor were spotless. The walls were new and white. Yet lingering in the air was a faint, unmistakable smell, something burnt. As if something had been scorched not long ago. Suddenly, Chris Hemsworth felt warmth in his pocket. Instinctively, he reached in. It was the blood jade. Resting in his palm, the blood jade was glowing with a faint red light. This sight was painfully familiar. Back in the villa beyond the first blood gate, whenever the red-clothed ghost on the 3rd floor approached their room, the blood jade hanging on the wall would glow red. In an instant, Chris Hemsworth's body went rigid. Could it be? Is there something unclean in this room? Chapter 18, Kai Vu Village, The Smell of Burning. The thought that something filthy and invisible might be lurking inside his room, silently watching him, sent goosebumps exploding across Chris Hemsworth's skin. He quietly slipped out of the room and into the corridor. And then, the sight before him made his scalp go numb. The red glow from the blood jade in his palm didn't fade. It grew brighter. Damn it! Chris Hemsworth cursed under his breath. He walked back and forth through the corridor, clutching the blood jade, his unease mounting by the second. Because he quickly realized, as long as he remained inside the guest house, the blood jade kept glowing. Did that mean, the entire guest house was unclean? After a brief moment of thought, he immediately went to find Alice Englert and Eric Church, called them into his room, and shut the door. Then he placed the blood jade in front of them. Hey, this is the blood jade from our previous instance, right? Damn it, why is it glowing? Eric Church's expression shifted from surprise to sheer terror. Memories of the female ghost from the previous blood gate flashed through his mind as he nervously scanned every corner of the room. But he saw nothing. Stop looking. Chris Hemsworth shook his head, his expression grim. As long as we're inside the guest house, this blood jade lights up. He then carefully explained the origin and function of the blood jade to Alice Englert. After listening, she frowned. Her red lips parted slightly. This guest house definitely has a problem. As she spoke, Alice Englert slowly looked around Chris Hemsworth's room, her gaze finally locking onto the wooden bed. The bed had clearly been cleaned with care. It was relatively tidy, even the small crevices near the headboard hadn't been neglected. But Alice Englert extended a slender finger and lightly brushed it across the floor beneath the bed. A thick layer of dust clung to her fingertip, along with a few strands of hair. See? The two nodded. Chris Hemsworth fell into thought. Eric Church, however, looked confused. Isn't this just because they didn't clean under the bed? That's normal, isn't it? That's not the problem. Chris Hemsworth said slowly. It's that the dust is too thick. It's like this place hasn't been used for a very long time, and was suddenly cleaned up just for us. Eric Church shuddered. You're right. Alice Englert looked at Chris Hemsworth with clear approval in her eyes. She had guided countless newcomers. Very few were as perceptive and sharp as Chris Hemsworth. In fact, most newcomers were worse than Eric Church, panicking, screaming, and begging for help at the first sign of trouble. But wait, this is a guest house run by the village's tourism company. Eric Church said uneasily. That NPC, Ho Kong, made it sound like this village values tourism a lot. How could it have gone unused for so long? A chill crawled up his spine for no clear reason. You're right. Chris Hemsworth replied. Unless. His expression subtly changed as he lifted his head, just in time to meet Alice Englert's gaze. Her face was equally grave. She gave a faint nod. She knew exactly what he was thinking. Unless what? Eric Church pressed anxiously, stepping closer. Chris Hemsworth shook his head. We can't confirm it yet. I'll tell you later. Alice Englert glanced at the time. There's not much time left today. And we don't know when night will fall in this village. So after dinner, rest early. We'll explore the village tomorrow morning. Eric Church raised an eyebrow. There's still plenty of time tonight. Aren't we going out to look around? He remembered the previous blood gate. The female ghost had forbidden them from going to the third floor, yet the path to survival had been hidden. Ho Kong also warned them not to go out at night. Maybe. Alice Englert shot him a look and said calmly. The world beyond the blood gate is usually extremely dangerous at night. Think about your last gate. Didn't the ghost always come out at night to kill people? Unless you have a clear hint or a confirmed clue that requires risking it, I don't recommend acting at night. Of course. She added lightly. If you think you're heaven's chosen one, feel free to ignore me. Eric Church immediately deflated. After dinner, the three returned to their rooms to rest. And reality proved that Alice Englert's experience was invaluable. Because at around 7 o'clock, the sky over Kai Vu village darkened at a speed visible to the naked eye. From blazing sunlight to pitch-black darkness, less than 10 minutes. Even the nearest attraction to the guest house would be impossible to return from within that time. Which meant anyone still outside searching for clues to survival had to grope their way back in the dark. It's not midnight yet. Chris Hemsworth thought. Should be fine. The moonlight was clear. Though it was dark outside, the dirt paths were still barely visible. The blood jade lay on the bed, emitting a faint glow. Chris Hemsworth lay down, closed his eyes, and rested. Around midnight. He woke up. A sound had pulled him from sleep. He heard something. Something inside his room. Almost instantly, Chris Hemsworth was fully awake. Holding his breath, he listened. Something was crawling across the floor. Scrape. Scrape. It sounded like claws dragging against the ground, a grating noise that made his scalp tingle. Chris Hemsworth's body went rigid. He was almost certain, this thing was not human. The blood jade in his palm grew hotter and hotter. What is under the bed? The heavy stench of burning he'd noticed during the day flooded his nostrils. He wanted to turn his head and look, but reason screamed at him not to move. One movement could mean the difference between life and death. Gur. The thing let out a hideous sound from deep in its throat. As it crawled, it seemed to notice Chris Hemsworth, and suddenly moved toward the head of the bed. The sound of claws scraping the floor was horrifying. A wave of icy dread washed over Chris Hemsworth. The suffocating smell of scorching flesh filled every corner of the room. If he hadn't forced himself to endure it, he would have coughed violently. But he knew, he absolutely could not cough. Though he couldn't see the creature beneath the bed, Chris Hemsworth vaguely sensed, it couldn't see him. It didn't know he was lying on the bed. Under immense psychological pressure, Chris Hemsworth didn't make a single sound. Sure enough, constrained by some unknown rule, the crawling ghost couldn't climb onto the bed. After prowling beneath it for a while, confirming it hadn't found what it was searching for, it crawled out through the door. Before leaving, it even closed the door behind it. This ghost, Chris Hemsworth mocked himself inwardly, is oddly polite. But only he knew how terrifying the moment truly was. He was certain, if he had made any sudden movement, or faced that thing directly, he would have been dragged away. Or killed. Once the burning scented ghost left, the stench in the room quickly faded. The blood jade in Chris Hemsworth's hand cooled down, no longer hot. Just as he was about to fall back asleep, a man's scream pierced the air outside the window. A scream so shrill, so agonized, that it instantly wiped away every trace of drowsiness in Chris Hemsworth's mind. Chapter 19, Kai Vu Village, the Headless Corpse. Help, help me, ugh. The man screamed toward the guesthouse, his voice cracking in desperate pleas. But what answered him, was only deathly silence. Chris Hemsworth carefully got out of bed, moved to the wooden door, locked it, then crept toward the window. By the cold moonlight, he looked down into the courtyard. He saw a dark figure staggering out of the forest. Both hands were clawing frantically at his own neck. It was the man who had been screaming. As he wailed toward the guesthouse, he tore at his throat as if something invisible were wrapped around it. He tried to reach out toward the building, but his hands seemed beyond his control, snapping back to continue scratching his neck. His body spun helplessly in circles in the courtyard, as though some unseen force prevented him from getting closer. The man's screams grew more and more shrill, chilling anyone who heard them to the bone. Yet from beginning to end, not a single person in the guesthouse came out to save him. Perhaps no one heard. But even if they had, no one would have dared. Everyone knew how terrifying the world beyond the Blood Gate was. Rushing out to save someone could mean failing to save them, and burying yourself along with them. Finally, after more than 10 minutes, the man's agonized scream stopped. At first, it seemed like everything was over. But the next scene made Chris Hemsworth's eyes widen, he nearly screamed. Under the pale moonlight, the man knelt on the open ground in the courtyard. With both hands, he tore his own head off. Blood erupted violently, splashing all the way up to the second floor. Even more horrifying, after ripping his head free, the man still didn't die. His mouth continued to release a ghastly cry for help. It hurts, save me, please, save me. It hurts so much. Why is no one saving me? He suddenly lifted his blood-soaked head, and slowly turned it toward the guesthouse, as if examining every single room. Chris Hemsworth instantly pulled back from the window and retreated step by step to his bed. His heart was pounding wildly. Only after a long time did complete silence return outside. And only then did Chris Hemsworth drift into a restless sleep. The next morning, he was awakened by knocking at the door. When he opened it, Alice Englert stood outside, already neatly dressed. As usual, she wore almost no makeup, except for a striking touch of vivid red lipstick. Get dressed. After breakfast, we'll take a walk around a nearby attraction. Maybe we'll find clues to the way out. Chris Hemsworth nodded without saying much. He quickly got ready and went downstairs, where Eric Church and Alice Englert were already waiting near the entrance. A crowd had gathered. Chris Hemsworth counted silently, then frowned. 3 people were missing. Had they left early? Or were they still asleep? Or, what's wrong? He asked as he joined Eric and Alice. Neither answered. Alice Englert tilted her chin toward the open courtyard. There lay a body. Mangled. Headless. It was the man Chris Hemsworth had seen the night before. He pushed through the murmuring crowd and approached the corpse. The man's head was gone, leaving only a headless body. His neck was covered in bloody scratch marks, and bits of flesh still clung beneath his fingernails. Does anyone know him? Chris Hemsworth suddenly turned and asked the crowd. A young woman stepped forward, her face deathly pale, her voice weak. He might be my friend, but I'm not sure, he doesn't have a head. Chris Hemsworth motioned to her. Then come take a closer look. She recoiled in terror, waving her hands frantically, her voice breaking into sobs. No. I can't. Chris Hemsworth fell silent. After a moment's thought, he understood, passing through a blood gate. Most of the others were newcomers. Seeing such a brutal corpse for the first time, their reactions were understandable. Suddenly, someone in the crowd shoved the girl. She screamed, stumbled forward several steps, and collapsed to her knees in front of the headless body. She covered her eyes at once, not daring to look. Thankfully, after a night of wind, the stench of blood had faded somewhat. Otherwise, Chris Hemsworth feared she would have vomited on the spot. He stood up, moved to the side, and spoke to the girl covering her eyes. All right. I've blocked the blood. Just look at the clothes and other details, can you confirm his identity? Hearing this, she cautiously opened a narrow gap between her fingers. After a few seconds, she nodded, her voice trembling. Yes, it's him. Chris Hemsworth frowned. As expected. The dead man was one of them. Do you know where he went last night? Chris Hemsworth asked. The girl took a deep breath. After a long pause, she finally steadied herself. Last night, he wanted me to go with him to the shrine on the mountain behind the village. He said that NPC, Ho Kong, forbidding us to go there meant the way out must be there. But I was scared, so I didn't go. He went alone, and then he never came back. The shrine? Hearing this, Eric Church's face turned ashen in the crowd. Clearly, he had entertained the same idea before. If Alice Englert hadn't stopped him, perhaps now there would be another headless corpse on the ground. See? Alice Englert's voice was gentle, yet it sent a chill down Eric Church's spine. This is the result of reckless action at night. All right. Let's go eat breakfast. She parted her red lips, yawned lightly, and walked away from the guest house first, deliberately avoiding the corpse as she headed toward the village dining after her. Hey, are we just leaving the body here? No one's going to deal with it. Alice Englert didn't turn around. If you have the kindness, you can bury him. But it's meaningless. In the blood gate, the dead, their bodies disappear quickly. Chris Hemsworth carefully examined the corpse once more. Seeming to notice something, he quietly took an item from the man's clothing and concealed it in his palm. Then he stood up and followed Alice Englert and Eric Church, toward the dining hall. Chapter 20, Kai Vu Village, the Spirit Tablet. The dining hall was built not far from their guest house. Unlike the guest house, this place looked strange. Normally, a dining hall was just a large open space where everyone sat together to eat. But the dining hall in Kai Vu Village was divided into 3 floors, filled with numerous small private rooms for guests. While receiving his meal, Chris Hemsworth asked the woman serving the food. Auntie, is the dining hall here all made up of small rooms like these? The woman seemed startled by the question. She froze for a moment, a flicker of panic flashing through her eyes, before answering hesitantly. Yes. It used to be a big hall, but later, some tourists didn't like it. And tourism is an important source for the village, so we changed it into small rooms. Hearing this, Chris Hemsworth narrowed his eyes. Source of what? Source of what, exactly? The woman appeared unnerved by his sharp gaze. She avoided his eyes and replied. It's the economy. I think it's the economy. Ah, I'm just a cook, I don't understand these things. If you want to know more, you should ask the person in charge. Chris Hemsworth nodded slightly and smiled. Thank you, Auntie. He carried his tray into a small room on the left side of the first floor. Alice Englert and Eric Church were already inside, talking about something. When they saw Chris Hemsworth enter, Eric Church hurriedly asked. Brother, did you hear someone crying for help outside the window last night? Chris Hemsworth set his tray down. I did. It was the man who died outside, calling for help. He ran out of the forest first, then clawed at his own neck like a madman, and in the end, tore his own head off. Hearing Chris Hemsworth describe it so calmly, Eric Church felt a chill crawl up his spine. He tore his own head off. Alice Englert, how is that casually picking at her food, said. In the world beyond the blood gate, nothing is impossible. I'm sure it wasn't just me and Chris Hemsworth who saw what happened last night. After ripping his own head off, that man screamed in agony for a long time before he finally died. No one went out to save him, and luckily so. Otherwise, who knows what might have happened. As soon as she finished speaking, Eric Church shuddered. He could easily imagine how horrifying that scene must have been. Yet the two people in front of him were unbelievably calm. Alice Englert was one thing, she was experienced, having entered and exited the blood gate many times. But Chris Hemsworth's mental state was something seriously wrong, wasn't it? Then, why did he tear his own head off? Eric Church asked cautiously. The three of them fell silent. Suddenly, Chris Hemsworth took a small wooden tablet out from his chest and placed it on the table. Why he did it, I don't know, he said. But I do know this, he definitely encountered something unclean in the temple on the mountain behind Kai Vu village. The moment the other two saw the wooden tablet, their expressions turned grave. That was a spirit tablet for the dead. Brother, this is. I found it on him. Damn it. This is extremely unlucky stuff. You actually dared to touch it? Chris Hemsworth shook his head. He took out the blood jade and placed it beside the tablet. The blood jade did not glow. I've already checked it. The tablet itself isn't the problem. The problem is the temple. Alice Englert picked up the tablet, gently rubbing the name carved into it with her finger. Her beautiful eyes flickered. Niam Shuyan. She softly read the name, as if recalling something. Then she raised the tablet to her nose and sniffed lightly, her brows lifting. There's incense on it. It smells like something used to worship. Standing beside her, said. Let me smell it. Alice Englert handed him the tablet. The moment Eric Church inhaled, his expression changed. Seeing that something was wrong, the other two immediately asked. What is it? What's wrong? Eric Church's face was grave, his voice dry and tense. My martial uncle used to specialize in incense. Normally, offerings to the dead use sandalwood, agarwood, camphor, or patchouli. These 7 types of incense aren't just for showing respect, they're mainly used to ward off evil. But the scent on this tablet is wood incense. It's used to lure evil spirits. This kind of incense isn't sold on the market at all. Only masters who truly understand incense can make it, using special methods. After speaking, he sniffed it again to confirm he wasn't mistaken. Once more, silence fell over the room. They all realized something was deeply wrong with this village. What was being worshipped in the mountain temple behind Kai Vu village wasn't a deity. It was the dead. Even more disturbing. Someone had used wood incense to worship the spirit tablets of these dead people. I told you, Alice Englert said slowly. This blood gate of yours is extremely troublesome. A rare seriousness appeared between her brows. The real difficulty might be higher than the fourth gate, maybe even the fifth, for ordinary people. But that also makes sense. If it weren't this dark, this twisted, it wouldn't have given birth to the terrifying ghost you encountered at your very first blood gate. Chris Hemsworth suddenly remembered something and told them about the charred thing that had crawled into his room the previous night. Both of them shook their heads, saying they hadn't encountered anything like that. Even so, Eric Church's expression on the blood gate was far too sinister. Looks like we need to speed things up, Alice Englert said. In 6 days, the village will hold a temple festival. That's the time limit the blood gate gave us to find a way out. If we can't find it within those 6 days, then when the festival begins, something unimaginably horrifying will definitely happen. As she spoke, a chilling smile curled at the corner of her lips, sending shivers down the spines of the other two. All right, Sister Alice, Eric Church raised his hands in surrender. This world beyond the blood gate is already scary enough, don't scare us even more. After we finish eating, where do we go first? Alice Englert rolled her eyes, then put down her chopsticks. We start with the closest place. About 2 kilometers from here, there's a temple called Fuk AC Tuesday. We'll go take a look, and ask the villagers, by the way, who exactly Niyam Shuyan was. I have a feeling this dead man named Niyam Shuyan is a key clue to solving everything. The other two agreed. After eating, they returned to the guest house. Just as Alice Englert had said, the headless corpse had completely disappeared. As if nothing had ever happened there. Inside the guest house, Ho Kong had stayed in his room the entire time. But he was like a wooden puppet, sitting at the desk, endlessly repeating only 2 actions. Drinking water. Answering the phone. Yes. All right. I'll arrange it. Gulp gulp. Yes. All right. I'll arrange it. Gulp gulp. Yes. After watching for only a moment, all 3 felt their scalps crawl. Chris Hemsworth tried talking to Ho Kong, but no matter what he said, the man only smiled and replied, all right. Seeing that there was truly nothing to be gained, the 3 of them left the guest house. Sunlight shone down on their bodies, yet none of them felt even a trace of warmth. Damn it, this place is too freaky. Eric Church cursed, rubbing his hands together. Alice Englert slung her backpack over her shoulder and said, this is only the beginning. The truly bizarre things are still ahead. Just wait and see. Your blood gate has only just started. I only hope that after you leave this gate, you won't be left with psychological trauma.